Let's get more on all this. Michael Bociurkiw is a former spokesperson for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, a familiar face on the show. He joins me now. Michael, good to have you back on the show. Let me pick up, not with Zelensky, but with what we heard from President Putin, who spoke. I lost track of how long he was speaking for, but he did say that Russia would respond should Europe provoke Moscow amid what he called an allied militarization of the continent, driven, he says, by hysteria. Of course, we know it's not hysteria. We've seen incursions in Poland, Romania, Estonia, and now Europe's talking about a drone war. What do you make of what's come out of these meetings so far, 2 days of meetings?
Yeah, good to be back on with you. This is Mr. Putin doing what he usually does, rattling the saber, and mostly, I think, for a domestic audience, firing them up. And, let's face it, Russia is already well into Europe with these incursions that you mentioned, with other forms of hybrid warfare, including here just a few days ago, for the past months, trying to destabilize Moldova and the elections that were held here. So, I just wish that European leaders would stop sleepwalking their way through this all, and most importantly, prepare their populations for what's about to come. Because if Mr. Putin gets Ukraine, so goes the Europe that we know of today.
Let's talk then about the options, because European leaders meeting in Copenhagen, we certainly heard this yesterday, have been, discussing employing Russian assets, those frozen Russian assets, to ease the burden, right, of supporting Ukraine from their own national budgets. Is there consensus on this? Because I understand there are legal concerns too here, Michael.
Yeah, we're talking about a 140 billion euro loan, more or less half of what total frozen Russian assets are in Europe right now. The big holdouts seem to be Belgium, after all, the home of Euroclear, where these assets sit. And, the prime minister, I don't blame him. He is somewhat anxious about the reputation to Belgium. He's very anxious about the burden that might fall on Belgium should Russia pursue recovery of these assets that would go to a loan in Ukraine. And of course, we also have on the sidelines Hungary and Slovakia, which means if they don't agree, we don't have the entire bloc, and other innovative measures need to be used to get that money to Ukraine. But one quick factoid here, there's roughly a $3.5 billion a month budget hole in the Ukrainian economy. But also, let's put this into perspective, 140 billion euros, that's only about 11 or 12 months of Russian energy revenues. So Russia is really kicking up dust about this, but they'll eventually get over it.
We've heard what Kremlin had to say, saying it's illegally confiscating Russian property. In Russia, I think they said we call it theft. But you argue, and I get your newsletter, you argue the choice is simple. Pay less now or pay much, much more later. Then what is that message to Europe if you're looking at the long term here, Michael?
Yeah. Well, in World Briefing, I did put there clearly is that if Europe doesn't get its act together and defend Ukraine, and we've recently been seeing new moves by the Trump administration to not only provide better intelligence to Ukraine for long-range strikes, but also better weaponry. If they don't get their act together and defend Ukraine, it will become a lot more expensive for Europe. We're already seeing the destabilization caused by those incursions, but also things like cutting of submarine cables, sanction evasions. And, if Europe, I think the message is finally getting into the Polish leaders, at least, because they're very close to Ukraine. If Europe doesn't put up the defenses now, they will have to start thinking in the not too distant future about building bomb shelters in kindergartens and in schools across Europe. The stakes are very, very high. Mr. Putin is an autocrat who loves to probe, loves to test, see how far he can go. And I got to say, he's doing a pretty good job so far. It's caused a lot of anxiety.
And most likely will cause anxiety if it's true what we're hearing. And this is according to TASS, Russian media saying, and this is coming from what we heard today from President Putin, that the Russian army, Michael, has entered Soares, Kostiantynivka, and apologies for my accent, Kranomersky. What is the significance, particularly of Kostiantynivka?
Yeah, Kostiantynivka is part of the 50-kilometer so-called fortress belt. These are heavily fortified cities with very, very important military and industrial infrastructure. And this doesn't come as a huge surprise because for more than a month, Russian forces have been closing in on Kostiantynivka from 3 different directions. But should they take it, huge blow to Ukrainian military morale and to Ukrainian messaging, and it could potentially open up the way for them to get closer to Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, pretty much opening the door for them taking the rest of the Donbass. This is something that Ukraine has fought very heavily for to defend, but I think you and I have spoken in the past about the problems on the Ukrainian side too, the lack of rotation, the lack of younger men coming into the military. So there's also a whole stack of problems on the Ukrainian side that need to be dealt with. But no doubt about it, it's not a game changer, but it's certainly going to make an impact militarily for the Russians.
If true, of course, is according to TASS. But I appreciate it, Michael, such important context and analysis. Thank you very much. Great to see you, Michael, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.